Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second part of our our topics today on standing out in your public health interview. This afternoon session is going to be covering the tough interview questions that you oftentimes will get or you hear about from others, or that you have had during interviews of your own, and then how to think about these interview questions and the skills that are usually associated with those. We're going to try our best to kind of, break down some of the things that kind of go on with these questions, why they're being asked, and then take certainly time to answer your questions about questions. So we're more than happy to do that as well. We'll take our time to do as much of that as we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to Olivia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Yes, as Paul said, we're essentially going to take a little bit of a look behind the curtain and really kind of assess what these questions are about and how you might be able to approach them. So when it comes to the different types of questions that you'll find in interviews, they're mostly going to be related to behavior or open-ended. And so what that means is that they are going to be questions in which it may start with like a how or a what, to be able to kind of really decipher more information about you, but then also looking at those behavioral questions and focusing on, how you may have approached something or how do you work through challenges and problems, just so that you can learn more again about how you can apply that forward and how your past experiences can reflect on what you would be like as a employee with them. So answering some of those tough questions, the way that we're going to break this down is looking at the skills that you want to showcase based on the question, how to answer it, and what the employers are looking for. So interview questions, they're usually open-ended, and they just, like I said, they kind of try to get more to at the heart of you, how, what, or why. They're not trying to, make you look any type of way. They really are trying to get a better idea of the things that they've learned about you through the application, right? Does what's on paper match, who you are and how you show up in the workspace? And of course, the best way to do that is to kind of gauge what other environments have been like for you and how you've navigated those. So of course, with any interview, there's questions. And like I said, we're going to look behind that and see what's the question behind the question. So what are these employers really getting at? What skills are they trying to kind of get you to highlight so that they can learn more about you as a professional? So then you have behavioral questions. So these are really going to be focusing on some of your soft skills. They're about your performance, what you've done before, and that's going to give them an indication of how you might work in the future. So some of the core soft skills are going to be leadership, teamwork, of course, communication skills. They've already probably gotten a really good idea of your written skills up at this point if they've asked you to do an interview, but how are your oral skills? How do you communicate in that way? Problem solving skills, time management, you have your technical skills, and then also conflict resolution. There are many different soft skills, but these are definitely the ones that we've seen commonly across employers and what they're looking for to find out more about you. So these are just some common interview questions that you will run into. They definitely are a lot of them, but it's nice to familiarize yourself with them so that maybe you're not thrown off too much when you hear them. Also recognize that with these questions, you may hear a variation of them, right? And that's the idea of kind of understanding what is the question behind the question, or what skill set are they trying to get you to speak more to? Because if they word the question differently, but what they're really trying to get to the heart at is the same, then it will be easier for you to answer the question because it won't be as off-putting if you hear it in a different way. And so these slides, of course, will be made available to you all inside of the Zoom events lobby. So if you want to take the time to go through these questions, familiarize yourself with them and practice them, you absolutely do that. In fact, I encourage it. Okay, so going into open-ended questions and what they look like. So what is your greatest strength? As many of you know, this is probably going to be paired with what is your greatest weakness, and we'll be getting to that next. But your greatest strength, it probably feels like an easier question to talk about because you're talking about yourself in a positive light. But we still want to kind of touch on this here and kind of give you some tips on how you might approach it. So, the skill that you want to showcase is going to be your self awareness. How in tune are you with yourself in the ways in which you've shown up in the workplace? And how have you done that? How have you maybe advanced? What does that look like? What efforts have you put into that? So you do want to focus on those efforts. You do want to focus on, how have you gotten to that place of this being your strength, whether that was some sort of professional development or training, academic training, or whatever that may be. It could also be a talent. It could be something that comes very naturally to you, but even with talents, these are things that maybe you might want to polish up on and take the time to improve. What the employer is looking for here, they want to see if you can have a balance between your confidence and your humility. Are you self aware enough to recognize this is an area that you excel in, but you're not necessarily showing it from a place of being all about your ego, right? Because typically, if you are very much about yourself and kind of just really just doting on yourself, it can also reflect on you in other areas, right? Maybe that might reflect poorly on you being a team player or what have you. So there definitely is a fine line here with answering this question. Like I said, it's probably an easier one, but kind of just think through to yourself, like, what is my greatest strength? Maybe you have multiple strengths and maybe you just want to narrow it down. Or maybe you want to utilize this question as a way to showcase how you have used your greatest strength to, support others in the workplace or even to just kind of get the job done. Then you have what is your greatest weakness. So this is probably a little bit more tough than the what is your greatest strength. Self-awareness, again, here is huge, but it's a different kind of self-awareness. Of course, there's still that are you in tune enough with yourself to kind of recognize things about you? But this one is more focused on do you know enough about your areas of improvement? And then also, I think that you should take it a little bit further and consider how then am I improving those areas or what attempts have I made or am going to make? And that right there is really what you want to get across to the interviewer is that you have an understanding of an area in which you maybe don't excel in, but because of that awareness, you're constantly working on it, right? So again, focusing on that plan to improve. What does that look like? Have you started to apply some particular tools and measures to whatever that weakness is? If so, how are you applying that? If you feel like it's been successful and you're seeing improvement in yourself, you can even touch on that as well. All these things are going to turn what is a difficult question into more of a positive light. The other thing I would say here is one thing that you want to stay away from is using a strength as a weakness. So, what that could be is if you say, well, my greatest weakness is that I'm too organized. And although organization is a great thing, they're not asking you about a strength. They may have actually even covered that. And when you use a strength as a weakness, it actually shows that maybe you're not as self aware when it comes to your areas of improvement. So definitely, before an interview, because this is a common interview question, consider what are some areas in which I can improve in and how have I been taking those measures to improve that? So why are you interested in this position? This is also a very common question that you might hear. You want to show your motivation. You also want to show what you know about the role and show that you've taken the initiative to learn more about the role. This is a really good way to talk about your skills, talk about what is driving you. How are you continuing to press forward? You can also use this as an opportunity to talk about your passions. Maybe your passion and your skills relate to one another. You're really passionate about this area of public health. And then you've also developed skills that are going to allow you to be successful in this particular area. So when thinking about this question, definitely take some inventory before you are, considering the role. Think about yourself. Think about how you and the things that you want to do are connected to that or the things that you have done. I also say that this is a really good opportunity to look over the position in general before interviewing. You want to review the position that you're going to be interviewing for again, but also looking at it with a different lens of, what speaks to me about this role, because employers are really wanting to know why this role, right? Why do you want to be in this particular role? We have so many different roles at our organization, so why this one? What is your greatest professional or personal achievement? The skill here is really kind of focusing on your values. I would also say that it focuses on your contributions, right? How have you contributed out, whether it be to others, whether it be to a project that you worked on or your specific area of work. So, of course, thinking of something that you are very proud of and why are you proud of it? I think that's the important piece is being able to articulate that and kind of really speak towards what makes this, so great for you? What makes this stand out for you? Why are you proud of that? I think any opportunity that you can to relate this back to a skill is great. So your why could be connected to, maybe it allowed you to flex a certain skill. Maybe it allowed you to improve in a certain area. Or it could just really go back to your passion for helping people, your passion for whether it's community building or wherever it is that you feel like you're most passionate about, just really kind of focusing on that why and being able to articulate that out is going to be important. Values, of course, it's something that employers are assessing because it says a lot about you, where you place your values in. And a lot of times our values are going to affect who we are as a professional. So definitely consider, what are my values? What matters the most to me? And when you're thinking about your greatest personal or professional achievement, is this one that connects to those things that you say that you value? What do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? This definitely can be a difficult question. Sometimes it's hard to envision that. And of course, that could change, right? It can change from where you currently are in 2 years. The way you see things could be completely different, and that's okay. I would say, really consider your commitment and where you are and your desires for your public health work. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lofty achievement. A lot of times when people think about a 5-year plan, it's, oh, I'm going to accomplish this degree, I'm going to do that, or whatever it is. But it's more so about you showcasing that you are accountable, that you are forward thinking, and that you have the dedication to, see things through, and that you have kind of an outline for yourself, right? That you're constantly looking to progress forward. And again, that progression can change, but focus on the now. Focus on where you see yourself at now, and then how you see that maybe changing over the next 5 years, or I should say, how you would like to see that change. You absolutely can relate it back to the position. Maybe it's growth within the role if given the opportunity to fulfill it, right? Maybe it's another area of professional development that you can kind of tap into. So if you want to relate it back to the position, I think that makes it even better because you're kind of bringing it back to your knowledge and your awareness of the role or your knowledge and awareness of yourself. But as long as you're showing them that you have that commitment, that you're really serious about your career and your own improvement, I think that that will be a great approach to this question.
Hey, Olivia, a quick question from Aaron.
Sure.
It says, is it better to say that we would like to do certain work in this position, showing long-term commitment, or to show interest from for upward advancement and development?
That's a good question. Sometimes that can be tricky. Sometimes coming in when you focus more so on the upward, I guess, development into another role, it very much puts emphasis on maybe you are not as focused on taking in or learning all that you can from the role that you're applying to. So I think there's an expectation that all employers have that you have some desire to progress and advance. I would say that in mentioning that, it's okay to mention that, but I just wouldn't stay there and spend as much time speaking to that piece of it. But more so, the role in and of itself and your commitment to that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Paul.
Yeah, it's pretty much kind of the same things, which is you're trying to make sure that the interviewer has an understanding that this not only is a place you can see yourself, but also knowing that, if I can prove that if I can show to you that I can do a good job at this, I'm open and want to more, I'm interested in more opportunities, more exposure to be able to do more within the organization. So you want to say, I'm confident that I can do this job, but I still have to prove to you that I can. And then hopefully after I prove to you that I can, you'll allow for me to expand or move upward within the organization.
Yeah, that's a really great way to approach it. Are there any other questions in the chat?
Nope, that's
No.
it.
Okay. All right. Okay, so why do you want to work here? I would say similar to, why you want this position, it definitely is going to be about you showing your knowledge and what you know. Of course, you want to bring forth your authenticity, to, letting them see your true self, but you also want to show that you have taken the initiative to do some research on the organization. Very similar to why do you want this position? You could have applied to any organization. There are many organizations that do the similar or the same kind of work. So why this particular entity? Is there something that stands out about them? Maybe, it is the level at which they do their work, the capacity that they have to actually reach people and support that. If it's a research organization, maybe it's, because of the research that they are producing and the ways in which it affects the field of public health. Whatever it may be, this is definitely something that you want to take in as a research opportunity for yourself to learn more. And it's something that you can anticipate. I would say most of these questions you can anticipate, but what I mean here specifically is that you apply to the position, you apply to the company, so you can come prepared with your why for the organization because you know it's something that they may ask and you have the opportunity to look more into them. You may have to do a deeper dive than what you find, out on Google. Maybe you've done some informational interviewing and you've talked with people who actually work at the organization and they can kind of give you a little bit more insight on the day-to-day or the company culture, and you want to speak to that. And if there is something that stands out about the company culture and the way that they value their employees, all of these are things that would be great to share out with an employer. But I think the key takeaway here is that you are really taking that initiative, you are showing up very authentically, and that you're letting them know that they as an organization stand out to you above the rest. Okay, so why should we hire you? This question does come in many forms. It could be, why do you believe you're the ideal candidate? Again, focusing on the skill here because they may, ask the question in many different ways. But they want to know, again, about your confidence and your self-awareness, right? So this is your time to persuade them. This is your sales pitch, right, about yourself. So it's really going to kind of look at, how you can put out there the skills that you have, the most important ones that are going to be pertinent to the role. I think very much sticking to that, like showcasing the skills that are connected to the position that they're hiring you for is definitely going to be a selling point. Things about you that you believe make you stand out above the rest. This could be your commitment level. This may be a position that maybe you don't know every single thing that they're asking, and that's okay because it means that there's room for you to be able to grow within the role. But if that's the case, maybe you want to sell your commitment to learning. Maybe you want to sell your commitment to being adaptable, right? That as you maneuver into this position, you have the capacity to take in information and then put that information to work and be able to do that and do it very well, or do it exceptionally, whatever it may be. So having something here that you can focus in on as far as an area that you really feel confident in, I think will be very important when showcasing your skill to the employer for this question. Why are you leaving your current job? So this is definitely another tricky one. It is another one of those kind of like fine line questions. You want to be honest, but you also want to do it in a very professional way. I would discourage you from, saying anything really negative about your previous employer. In fact, you might find that you need to give more of a diplomatic answer. So if there was some discourse at your previous role, you don't necessarily need to go into the details of what happened, or, you could lean more into that maybe you were looking for a different sort of career path, or maybe you were looking for an area in which that you can grow in a little bit more, and you had found that you had grown a lot at your previous organization and were just realizing that maybe you just needed something different. If you do want to kind of touch on anything that was difficult or that you did have a discourse with, You can share that there may be a difference in values. There may have been a difference in, just workplace expectations or things to that regard. So that way you are making sure that you're being honest, but again, you're not kind of digging in too deeply. You're not speaking poorly of the previous organization, because that's definitely going to leave an impression on the employer. The way in which that you speak about your previous employer, they might be able to draw the conclusion that you would do the same with them if maybe things did not go well and you were moving on from the role that you are now interviewing for. So definitely making sure that you are doing this with professional tact. I just want to take a moment here if there's any questions that you have in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature and come off of mute to ask your question.
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, we will move on. Now we're going to take a look at behavioral questions. These are a lot more specific because they are trying to assess how you operate. What exactly would you do in particular situations? And they're looking at this and determining this based on what you've done in situations at previous opportunities that are similar. I will also say that maybe if you have not yet had a full-time professional opportunity, that you have had to kind of be able to draw from for scenarios in which you have utilized certain skill sets. Think about your time while you've been in school. I'm sure that you've probably done some team projects and you've probably had to work through some conflict resolution, or really kind of speak to your leadership role if you are within a particular project, or your collaboration efforts. So it does not have to be something that is like a paid opportunity that you utilize as far as the particular scenario that you're going to give to showcase how you navigate certain situations. So focusing on the takeaway as much as you do the story is going to be really important here. When you're answering this question, you want to consider, what do I want them to remember about me, right? And the way that you can do this is utilizing the STAR method. So we'll get into that in a moment of what exactly that is, but it's definitely steps that you can take to be able to answer this question and do it in a way that you are showcasing your skills and they're getting a better idea of who you are. You will also recognize that you'll have the past future observer method. So with the STAR method, you have situation is the S in that. So describing the situation, you want to set the scene. Who was there? What was going on? Where was it? When did it happen? What have you? But with that, you don't necessarily want to stick too long in the situation, as long as you give them enough detail to kind of envision what the environment was like. Then moving on to the T, this is going to be your task. So what was the goal that you were working towards? Now, this could be something that you were actually tasked with, right? Something, maybe a supervisor gave you a particular task or something to take care of, or maybe it was something that you kind of tasked yourself with. You recognize what the situation was, and then you realize, okay, this needs to be resolved, right? So I'm going to do X, Y, or Z so that I can achieve a goal. And that brings us to the action. What action did you take, which is the A? Describing how you address the situation and focusing on you in the situation. Because again, this is about them assessing how you navigate different situations. How do you bring your skills to the forefront in order to navigate those situations? So focus on you as much as possible. And then kind of break it down as much as you can. When it comes to the S and the T, you don't want to focus on those as much. You, of course, want to put them out there, but to show them how you are navigating through either a difficult situation or utilizing conflict resolution or working with team members. You really want to focus on the action, and then also that R, which is going to be your result or your reflection. So what happened as a result of the action you took? What happened? What came about of it? Here you want to focus on the impact of your work, the impact of you bringing your skills to the forefront, the impact of you being able to assess a situation, recognize whatever the issue is, take action on it, and then what comes from it. So what did you accomplish, or what did you learn? And I think that's really important here, because sometimes the situation may not be something that you need to necessarily accomplish, but it's something that you need to grow from, right? It's something that you have this important takeaway and that you feel like it has now affected who you are as a professional and improved you in that way. And that's really going to show them how you can take what you've learned into hopefully this next role that you're interviewing for. Okay, so we're just going to take a quickly switch over so that Paul can begin to share for the rest of the presentation.
And Olivia, while I'm doing that, looks like a question just showed up in the chat.
Absolutely. So it says, I'm currently transitioning from a clinical role to a public health role. How valid would it be to apply clinical scenarios when I showed skills in a different capacity, or should I focus more on situation things that I learned at school? Great question. I would say that you can do both. If you want to lean more into the public health focused part of things, utilize your academic training as the example. But there were probably many different soft skills that you used in your clinical experience that will also show up and be necessary for public health work as well. So that, goes back to those foundational skills that we showcased in the beginning, thinking about how you showed up as a leader, thinking about how you resolve problems, or when things happen very unexpectedly. For instance, when we think about working clinically, I'm sure there are a lot of different things that you cannot have anticipated happening, and you had to work through that and resolve it. Very similar things happen within public health. I mean, think about the pandemic. It definitely wasn't something that we were all expecting. So there is a way to connect it back. And you want to draw from the experiences that you have. I think what would be the most helpful is to utilize your clinical experience as a means to showcase your soft skills, and then utilize your academic training as a means to showcase more of those technical skills that are going to be directly applicable to public health.
Okay. So continuing on with talking about behavioral interviews, there is another method that's called now the past, future, and observer method. And so what you're actually doing when you're hearing a behavioral question is you are recalling a past experience. You're recalling something that matches with what the question is asking for. You have something that is an experience that you feel good about sharing, that can be covered through the STAR method, or at least has that takeaway that you want someone to know and has that point that you want to make at the end. Now, knowing that oftentimes you might not have something at the top of mind or have something you can think of, is you can use this ideas that what would come up in the future. So most of the times these behavioral questions are about things you're going to do in the future. How is it that you can predict kind of what that would be? And I think most of us, if we had to think about something, we could use that. And then there's this observer role. And so what it may be here is that you're going to go through and say, well, I haven't been in this situation, but I know someone else. Here's what was good about it, or here's what was bad about it and what I would do differently. So when we start to think about these, kind of the steps of answering these questions, the first thing that I want everyone to kind of keep in mind with this is when I hear the question, the first thing I want to think about is the skill that I want to showcase. So when I'm done giving my answer, what do I want them to know? What is that thing that I want to leave them with? What is that thing I want to have stuck in their head when I'm done talking? And if you can think about that first before making any of the other steps, I think it really will help you to connect the story that you're going to share in that answer. Then the next thing would be is to try to remember a past experience that would demonstrate the skill you want to showcase. And part of what you're doing with this too is that maybe you're not giving them the exact answer that they want, but you're giving something that's closely related to it. And so it's almost in some ways like you're giving like a politician answer, which is, I don't have a direct answer sometimes, but I can give you something that's close. And that's where the idea is that when you start to share all the details with this, and you can use the STAR technique as kind of the framework, you can allow for yourself the opportunity to answer the question all the time, no matter what, even if you can't remember an experience. So let's say in the moment during the interview, you go through the interview and you're really trying hard to remember something that you've done, or it's just you're feeling the pressure to give a response, you can't think of anything. So then you move on to this one, which is to project in the future. And then you say something like this to your interviewer. I can't recall a time that I've had this experience, but this is what I think I would do. And so what you're giving to them is still that same effect. You're still giving them that opportunity to showcase for yourself the skill that you think is important, that you want them to know. They don't necessarily need the story to understand the point that you want to make. So you want to kind of keep that in mind, is that you have that, this space to be able to kind of go off script if you need to. Very unlikely are they ever going to say, no, I need you to really kind of, I need a precise example of that. And it might be too that the example you think of, you might think of after the interview. So you can always reach back out to them afterwards, but maybe in the moment, you're not going to think about that. So let's say you don't have an experience and you're trying hard, you can't really kind of come up with something about a future experience, but you do know, hey, this sounds familiar. I've done something like this, and I have observed this. And so part of what you can do is to say, I haven't personally been in this situation, but I did observe what somebody else did, and here's what I would follow. And here's what was the situation, the task, the action, and the results of those things that happened there. So you're kind of, storytelling about somebody else's experience, but you're identifying that this is an outcome that I would like to have. This would be an outcome that I would like to replicate if I was ever in this situation again. And I would follow along with what they did. You just share as much of those details as you possibly can. And then if you don't have one, or if you have an observer, something you observed that did not go well, you can say something to, I haven't been in that situation, but here's what I observed that someone did that I would not follow, or that I would do differently, or that what they did is not necessarily what I would agree with, but I would have done something kind of like this if I was in that situation. And so what this just, again, allows you to do is give you the chance to be able to kind of think more critically about the questions that you're asked, and not feel like you're very much having to always give an example that represents that. All right. So now going back to the same kind of things, showcasing the skill and different things like that. So, oftentimes you're going to get questions about something related to leadership. And so tell me about a time you showed leadership. And again, you're identifying these as behavioral questions because they start with, tell me about, give me an example, describe, different things like that. The skill here obviously is leadership, but it's also too, you want to be focused on, well, how is it that you work with people, or how is it that you led? Employers are really wanting to kind of really truly understand is, what is the judgment that you had in doing the leadership? And that leadership doesn't have to necessarily even be a leader role. It could just be a role within a group to where you influence the decision of what the group did, or you felt it was in your kind of wheelhouse of what to do, which is to build consensus within the group to get them to move forward on a project. Or it's to understand that you were able to listen to everybody there and hear everybody's input to then move the group to move forward. So leadership takes a lot of different forms. You can read a lot of different things about leadership, but a lot of times leadership, oftentimes people say like leadership is you either lead from the front or you lead from the back. So the idea is you can learn a little bit too about what you think your leadership style is. And you can also to demonstrate to say, maybe it doesn't quite look on the surface like leadership, but it has leadership qualities with it. Another one, just like this too, describe your leadership style. And again, this might be more for the roles that are requiring, people to be in supervisory roles or management roles. But what it's truly trying to say is that, good leaders can know what's important to them. They can know what they value. They can know kind of what is top of mind of the things that are that make up who they are. And then by stating those in just a few words, they're also to be able to kind of say how the way they think about leading fits into the company culture. And so you want to kind of think about, leadership can be tied to value. So like, if you know what your values are, you can tie those into any question you might have to answer about leadership. All right, tell me about a time you surpassed people's expectations. So the skill that you're really trying to identify here is, your dedication to the work, your work ethic, your kind of willingness to kind of roll up your sleeves and do the things that are above and beyond what is being asked for. If you can demonstrate that you did something that was more than what was the asked requirement of you, people are going to notice those things. People are going to notice that you're willing to kind of do that. And if you have a track record of doing that in a lot of different places, there's a good likelihood that they could presume that you're going to continue to do that over time. So when you think about this question, when you exceeded expectations, it's really like they want to hear from you, how is it that you're dedicated to any place that you've worked in the past, so that it tells them this is how you would probably work again in the future. Tell me about a time you had to learn something quickly. So oftentimes when we are working, and especially in the first 6 to 9 months you start a job, there's going to be a huge learning curve. And part of what is important to be able to say is, how quickly can you learn something and be able to begin to utilize it? So part of what you're thinking about here is that, you're wanting to do as much as you possibly can. You're not just kind of coming in right away, but you're wanting to take the initiative. You're wanting to kind of learn more. You're wanting to you want to absorb as much information as you can. And they want to know is that you've had success in doing this. And so sometimes too, demonstrating that you can learn something quickly, maybe it's through your coursework, and you can say, it took me 8 weeks to learn how to do something in biostats. Well, that's a really short amount of time if to kind of learn how to use a software or something like that. So, you can pull these little examples from your experiences while you're in school to demonstrate some of these things that you're asking for, not expect that everything has to be related to something you do in the workplace. Tell me about a time you were successful on a team. So, skills that are always important here: teamwork, communication, interpersonal skills. So part of what, anybody that does interviewing in any organization, they will say that these are, those soft skills, those things are in high demand. Those make people really successful in their work. But they also too are looking at is how can you be adaptable to the people that are there, the personalities that you have to work with. And maybe what you're going to learn with this is that, working on a team, and there's a lot of teamwork that you have to do as a student. What are you noticing about the things that you do? How is it that you work with people? Are you a good listener first before you start to move forward with something? Or do you feel like you're a person more that wants to kind of take charge? But again, note too is that the skill set that's important with this one is not just the teamwork part of it, but it's the communication and how well you can get along with other people that you have to work with. Tell me about a time you had to work with a difficult person. So this is a conflict resolution question, and there could be many variations of this. It could be a variation of, how do you deal with a supervisor that doesn't give you good feedback? So again, it's a variation of the same thing, but I think part of what you want to remember with this is that there's always probably going to be some sort of a disagreement or some sort of a kind of different way of thinking, a different way of working that you're going to have to deal with. And what are the ways that you've learned to deal with that in the past? Usually one of the best ways to do this is, in part, I think what employers want to hear is that you don't have a problem approaching the person first to address to them what you think is an issue. And then after that, you can bring other people in. You can have other mediators if it doesn't kind of work out, but you at least make the effort to, using some emotional intelligence, using some kind of, maturity to demonstrate that I can go and talk to somebody face to face, tell them what my concerns are with them, see if I can resolve it with them. And then if I can't, then I can bring other people in after that. So tell me about a time you had to persuade someone. So this is another, kind of one of those questions to where you might have to convince somebody about your viewpoint on something. You're going to have to stand strong about your idea of what it is. Maybe what it is that you need to convince somebody that the solution that you have is the best one. So part of what they're looking for here is, again, looking at your emotional intelligence, because what you're trying to do here is, give somebody the ability to kind of know how it is that you can be a good problem solver. And so remembering too, can you listen first, then give your reasons for why? Do you have a way to create a persuasive argument for somebody to communicate with them to where it makes sense for them? And these are all qualities that would be good to have going forward. Tell me about a time you disagreed with someone. So again, going back to that conflict resolution, having a respectful, professional disagreement with somebody. Are you able to put yourself in their shoes? Can you think? Are you able to think about what they are thinking in terms of coming up with this with a solution, or are you immediately going to jump towards, being critical, being defensive? Are you immediately going to have this put a strain on a relationship you have with somebody? And so I can't imagine anybody's going to say, well, if I have a problem with somebody, I'm just going to, totally dismiss them. But I think part of what they want to hear from this is, if you've had that experience, what did you go through? What did you think about what you were doing? How did you think about maybe how you could improve something in the future? What is it that you learned from doing that type of experience? And then describe your most challenging project. What I thought about this one in terms of, thinking about the skill is that a lot of times when you do have challenging work, you start to feel very overwhelmed by it. You start to feel very much that it's not something that's ever going to get completed. And so can you show that you have resiliency? Can you show that you have stick-to-itiveness, if you want to think of it that way, that you're able to see something through? And then what you learn about yourself in completing the project. It might be a very daunting project that you never thought you were going to be able to finish, but the way that you can explain the steps that you did to complete that project, how you handled the adversity that came with it. Maybe the challenge was not one of your making, but from others that were interfering with it. It's just, are you committed to completing something? Are you committed to seeing something through, or did you just give up and kind of move on to the next thing? So that's what we're looking at here. And then tell me about a time you had to manage conflicting priorities. So, knowing that oftentimes when you're working, you're going to be working on the different things all at the same time. And so is there a way that you can show that you've been through that experience, that that you have, I have to complete this, complete this, complete this. Again, I'll go back to the idea of school. It's like you're taking a lot of classes, you have papers due at certain times, you have capstone thesis projects to work on, you might have practicums that you're having to do. There's a lot of juggling that you have to do during that. And you can use the experience of being a graduate student as a way to articulate the skill of, yeah, I can handle the pressure. Yeah, I can understand how to manage my time. You can also too say is that, each term I get better at what it is that I was doing. And by the time, I finished my program, taking courses over 8 weeks became a lot easier than when it first started. And so, using this kind of, very kind of accelerated way that the academics have done it at our school, it's a really good way to also to use that as an example of something you might be able to do in the future. And then tell me a time that you failed or that you made a mistake. This is a great question in terms of, again, going back to that self-awareness, to that weakness is part of it. But it's also too, it's like, how much can you be accountable? This is probably a really big thing with anybody in the workplace, is not laying blame onto other people, not, looking for somebody making an excuse for why maybe you didn't do something. And so part of what you want to think about this is that, what you can leave them with is, here are the things that I can do to make sure that these mistakes don't happen again. Or here's what I learned from those errors that I made along the way. I've learned what's better to prioritize. I know how a good way to create goals for myself. I know how to, have set things in place to where I can keep myself accountable all the way through. So are there any questions on anything talked about here, behavioral questions? I know, there's probably a lot more behavioral questions that we did not get to, but this would be a good time for anybody that has questions or stories or anything like that that they would like us to talk about. Okay. Olivia, anything else to add?
I don't think so. I think you
Okay,
covered that part very well.
perfect.
I
All right.
will say if you do have questions and maybe they're a little bit more personal to your situation, our inbox is very much open. So feel free to email us if you have any questions that maybe you want to ask now or anything that comes up later.
Yep. And we do have, we can do mock interviews. We can meet with you individually to go through questions, come up with certain ways that you want to answer these questions based on your own experience. So, definitely we can do that as well. Schedule times to meet. Just as a reminder, our last session of the day is going to be on interviewing with little to no experience. So just kind of talking through, what it's a moderated Q&A again with an alum who's going to speak about his experience in terms of what he's done in the interviewing that he's had when he didn't quite have the experience to get started in the work that he's doing now. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session.
Thanks, everyone.